Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert, and welcome back. I'm alongside Father Joe Grimaldi. The Father Joe Grimaldi podcast is being supported by our great friends at Hoot McInerney Starr Lincoln 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. The family, along with the entire staff, once again want to thank you. They've been serving our community for over 50 years with another 50 to come. That's why so many of their customers come back, second time, third time. Guys like me on their fourth Starr Lincoln SUV. Starr would like to thank you for one of their best months ever. And it's easy because they've got a great lineup of sedans and SUVs, and you have to stop by, say hi, have a cup of coffee, and take a look at that 2020 Lincoln Aviator. If you're not blown away, friends, I can't help you. Starr Lincoln 12 Mile and Telegraph. You can shop online at starlincoln.com. Highly recommend you do that. Hoot McInerney Starr Lincoln, 12 Mile Road and Telegraph in Southfield, the home of the Father Joe Grimaldi Starr treatment. Well, all is well in Grimaldi Land.
Oh, I think so.
All the rides are running well, and the staff is happy over at Grimaldi Land?
Oh, very much so.
It's always a happy day over there. Yes, you ought to stop on by next year. We're booked for the entire season, but Father Grimaldi Land is a wonderful place to visit.
Where is it, by the way?
It's, it's so secret that even I.
And I would have to go searching. But
That's
anyway.
right. Well, I'm sorry. I get up in the morning and I love Twitter. I happen to be a big fan of Twitter. And I just happen to put up a lot of information about on this date in rock and roll history. Rolling Stones, on this date. I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
Oh, I remember that
Yes,
one.
It went to number one back on this date. I believe it was 1965. Don't hold me to it. I'm not the greatest at years. But that's what I put up each and every day on Twitter. There's a lot of hate on Twitter. If you're a never Trumper, you're chiming in. If you are MAGA, Make America Great Again, you're all in. Now, when you get the never Trumpers going against the MAGAs, the Make America Great Again, you know what you get? You get a fight. You get anger. Yeah. You get two people who have never met, will never meet. They just go back and forth trying to one-up each other and be the smartest person, not only in the room, but on Twitter, which attracts a ton of more people to what they call the thread. And it goes on and on and on, and it doesn't stop until you either block all of the people or you just, hopefully the candle goes out. Okay, so I took a little while to get there. I started thinking, and I went over to Google, and I just typed in, why are people so angry? And I found out there's so much information about our anger, I was shocked. I wanted to talk to you today about anger, and I wanted to ask you point blank, does anything good come from anger?
Yes, I mean, let me put it this way. There are two kinds of anger.
Mm-hmm.
One that is a natural reaction to something that is not good. We encounter a statement that is dishonest or whatever the case might be, and it might cause me to react with, we might call it anger. But then there's another kind of anger, an anger which leads to what we hear about almost every day in the news, people murdering one another, shooting. It's so easy to take out the gun and shoot somebody else that it's become endemic, is that what they say? But basically it's everywhere. The other thing, too, you notice, is I don't think you could go on the highway at any one time without encountering some anger. Sometimes so serious that guns come out again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of these things we call road rage.
Yeah.
And I think all of us are guilty of it to a certain extent, but hopefully not to the extent that we start to take action on our anger, because that's when I think it becomes morally wrong. There's a natural anger that we just react to something that's not good, and that's not morally wrong because it's just a natural reaction to something.
Right.
Whereas the anger that leads to doing violence and so on, To me, that is something that is unethical. It's wrong.
There are two stages, you're right. Well, actually, there's multi-levels, tiers, and compartments of anger. But in its simplest form, let's go there for a second. I read this article. I don't normally read Atlantic magazine, but there's a tremendous piece. It was written in February of this year, and the author's name is James Averill. The title is Anger is one of the densest forms of communication. It conveys more information more quickly than almost any other type of emotion. So let's break that down a little bit. Let's unpack that, as the news people like to say now. What he says is that the good that can come out of anger is that you and I go at it. We brawl verbally. And then, when we take a breath, we settle down and we actually start to communicate. We start to work it out and find some common ground or a common thread that we can agree on. I'm not so sure I see that happening.
I'd have to agree with you. I don't. It may. I mean, I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's that he doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not what I'm saying.
No, it's a huge article. I mean,
I think in context, maybe it has some value. And yes, I suppose once you get this anger out of your system, maybe you can come to some sort of a compromise and understanding with the other individual. But if it is such a deep-rooted anger, I don't know how easily it's going to equalize and pacify the other person. It's not going to be an easy thing to do.
One of the reasons why I bring it up is because for my entire career in radio, I never once, ever, put any policy or politics on the air. No one knew anything about me, where I stood on political issues. I was thoroughly a three-wood right down the middle of a fairway. I would never say I was leaning to the right, leaning to the left. I tried to stay right in the middle because I learned a long time ago that if you say, I'm all in on Trump, I love the guy, you lose 50% of your audience.
Yeah.
If I say I wouldn't be caught in the same state as Donald Trump, I lose 50% of my audience. I can't win. So I've always been apolitical on the air. People have always just said, you always seem like a nice guy. I'll take that. I'll take a bow and leave now. That's where I want to go. I don't like arguments. I don't like watching people argue. I don't like watching people fight. And it's in many, many layers. It's in families, brother and sister, mom and dad, father versus son. You know where I'm going with this.
And I like what you're saying a lot. You know, there's an old-fashioned saying that at table you never discuss politics or religion.
I know. And more so now. In my world, that's what I was going to say.
Particularly if you're going to take sides.
I think it's worse now. I think it's the worst I've ever seen in my 60-some years. It seems to me to be everywhere, and maybe that's social media.
I wonder if it's related to not being able to listen. You know, to me, it's a very interesting argument that you're bringing up, Ken. When you're at table and you discuss anything, one of the things we have to learn to do is listen. If we can't listen, inevitably, especially when there's an easy way of getting and catching up with sides, if you want, inevitably there's arguments that cause anger on both sides. So I think one of the things, in order to have a true discussion, people have to learn to listen first. And then maybe they can resolve certain issues.
Yeah, but you don't have to... What's the old expression? If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. We can't go into a discussion regarding religion or politics when we're out with friends and say, now listen, we're all prepared and we're all good at listening. Nobody does that.
No.
Nobody lays down ground rules at a table. I went to lunch once and had somebody say to me, don't sit down until you tell me who you voted for. And I was PO'd.
You turned around, I'm sure, and left.
I said, I beg your pardon. I didn't say, I beg your pardon. I said, I beg your pardon. What are you asking me? And then the guy, he said, well, Molly gets a little amped up. Right now, she's just a little steamed. I said, I'd like to stay and have lunch, but if you're concerned, I can't stay. I thought we were here to have lunch and say hi to each other. That's the best I can do to mitigate this. And of course they all said, oh no, sit down, come on. And I did, and I sat down. But it was very, very tense.
It was, at least for a while, anyway.
Everybody tried to throw out topics to see if anything would stick and get us off that. But that's what I mean. You can be with your best friends and something can just all of a sudden, the spark goes off and bingo, here we go. I'm sorry, I'm doing all the talking here.
Oh, no, I'm glad you are.
I want to listen. I want to listen now because people just assume you have this super ability to calm everybody down and say, look, let's start by listening.
I may have to work at it a lot, a lot. For example, I know for myself, I have road rage.
We have discussed this.
I have, and I have to admit it. The only way I can calm myself is before I leave for even a short trip, and it's going to involve getting on the expressway or whatever the case might be, I usually talk to myself. I know it sounds strange, and I'll say, listen, if somebody does something you don't like, take a deep breath, and it'll go away. Just listen to the music and keep driving. It'll go away. But if you're going to react to that, whatever it was that the person did, it's going to be, you're going to get angry, they're going to get angry, and we don't know where it's going to end because you always read in the newspapers road rage leading up to, if not murder, at least some serious beating or whatever the case might be.
Somebody following you home.
Yes.
Somebody beating you up.
Yes.
Somebody shooting into your house.
Right.
And there is no resolution in that.
No.
You're going to get caught. Your life will change because of an automobile and a guy being too close to your rear end. I hate it too, Joe. I can't stand it. Look at this guy coming up on the left side. What's he going to do? How about the guy that will not let that guy in?
Sure.
Let him in. And everybody else hates your guts because you did a nice thing.
Right. But you avoided lots of other problems.
I avoid conflict. Maybe I won't live as long as everybody else. Maybe I should blow my top on a regular basis like I would have loved to have done at that lunch.
You did it beautifully.
Yeah.
It really did resolve the situation. Because it could have gotten so ugly that you would really hate it and nobody would be at peace.
Well, again, I don't know where I heard this or if I made it up or what it was, but somebody once called this the barber mirror effect. When the barber hands you a mirror to look at yourself and there's a mirror behind you, and it looks like there's just an endless amount of mirrors,
right?
Wrapping around behind you because it's mirror on mirror on mirror on mirror. That's how I always imagine most arguments ending, with that constant loop of the same thing. Because you're going to get in your car, you're going to go to bed, and that loop is going to go over and over and over and over again. I'm feeling a little tenser just talking about anger.
You're going to be practicing a very practical type of humility because you're not going to have the upper hand, huh? And that's the way it's going to be seen. But so what? It resolves the problem. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know what you're saying, and I immediately started thinking of maybe your other friend or maybe your spouse saying, why didn't you stand up for yourself?
Right.
And that in itself could start
another argument. Yes, we have to be careful.
That's what I'm saying with that barber mirror effect. It's endless.
Sure.
So I pray the day comes that we never have to start any sort of a social event by saying a prayer for civility.
Well, what I said at the very beginning, though, I think is true.
Or
there's a type of anger that's just, you get angry about something that is wrong. For example, if you see a situation that is morally wrong, it's a natural reaction to be angry at that. But then there's the other anger that leads to, it leads to hurting people. It leads to getting to the point, as you say, of not being able to resolve any issues at all.
Do you think, at the end of the day, somebody knows that they're responsible for starting the conflict? They were the aggressor. although they're still charged, they're still angry, they're still convinced that they are right, do you think that they internalize it and at least say to themselves, yeah, but you started it?
I'm not sure. Because I think it's emotion. And what you can't deal with emotions so logically, okay? Emotions take over very often, and the logic goes out the window. So I think it's very difficult to say that a person's going to sit down and say, well, I started that, or I didn't. The other person started that. And the next time we're in that situation, I'm going to do it differently. You know, that's what you would hope would happen.
Well, I'm hoping that people that listen to this, and I know for a fact, there's going to be a common thread in this podcast that people will, every single person that listens to this podcast will identify with what we're talking about right now. And I think it's interesting. I think it's important. But unfortunately, friends, I'm not sure there's any resolution whatsoever to it.
No, and it's related to the inability to forgive very often.
Exactly. Expressions like, you just had to get the last word.
Exactly.
Maybe that's our title.
Maybe
Maybe that's our title. But that's, in an argument, that's your mission, isn't it?
Exactly.
To have the last word. Are you guilty of occasionally?
Of course I am.
And so am I.
Yeah.
But it's funny, isn't it? People may even trail off into another room just to get their own last word.
Yeah, yes.
I really like this topic. I really, really do. There are so many dimensions, as I mentioned at the outset. Unfortunately, I think we got to take some positive from it and say that, as somebody once said, and this is sage, this is wise, and I think we should all do it, never go to bed angry, especially if you're married.
Easier said than done.
I would love to do, at some point, I would love to get to a stage with you and I in the podcast to take this somewhere and be able to sit out in front of people and sort of do, I'm a big fan of the town hall, where people sit around from both
and have questions.
But I would just love to go around the room and ask everybody to talk about the most recent episode of anger.
Sure.
What the situation was, and did anything good come out of it?
Well, you know, very often if people give it some thought afterwards, there's a possibility of a lot of good coming from it.
That's it. And that's what this article, you can go back and Google it, by the way. Once again, it's in Atlantic Magazine. The author's name is James Averill, Averill, and it's a long, long piece. But you may want to look at it. It has multi-dimensions to it, and I think you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, thank you, my friend.
Well, I'm happy to be able to be here and to discuss these things with you. I don't think we've really exhausted the topic by any means. By any means. It's really just the beginning.
What do you mean?
Let's not get angry over it. But anyway.
With that said, everybody, we'll see you next time on the Father Joe Podcast. I'm Ken Calvert.
Looking forward to it. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.